everyone, and welcome to this tutorial on how to properly use transfer papers. We're going to talk about the very best way to get the best result out of any transfer papers, not just the ones that I make and sell, but any transfer papers you use are going to follow the same rules that will apply and give you the very best results. We're going to talk about the best clay to use, how to use them, how long to leave them on your clay, the best way to rinse them off, things that can go wrong so that we can troubleshoot there, and just any other little detail that I can come up with. In order to demonstrate how to do this, I am going to show you guys how to make a really cute charm necklace. So I'm going to teach you how to make some chunky charms, and then I'll just make some earrings too on a larger piece because we're going to be doing things a little bit differently for the charms. And I want you to be able to see kind of like the standard way to use the paper and also like a little bit of a specialized way. I have here just a little sampling of papers that I might choose to use for the charms. You could make the charms with any type of paper. You could adjust this however you want. Don't feel like you have to have these papers to do any of this, but yeah, these are just the ones that I'm choosing for today. I'm going to set those aside for the time being. I also have a variety of cutters that are just going to be good for like a charm shape. So I have a little fish that I can make a charm with. I have some just like standard shapes. I like when I'm making charms for them to have sort of a bead look about them, and in order to do that, I find that having a curved edge really kind of gets that point across. So I do like having the curved edge cutters, but don't feel like you can't have something that has like sharper corners. It'll work just fine. So I'm going to set those aside. I've got a tissue blade, I have an X-Acto knife, I have scissors to cut shapes out of my papers. I have an acrylic roller. I really like this brayer style that you can actually roll. I've got water to pour on the transfers when we're ready. And as far as clay goes, that is where we should start, okay? I have heard some people say that they exclusively use Sculpey Soufflé for their transfers. I have also heard many people, probably many more people, say that Sculpey Soufflé and transfers do not go well together. It just doesn't work as well. The colors won't be as vibrant, because the souffle is like a drier type clay, and the toner that is on the transfer papers is actually a form of plastic. So you want your plastic to meld and mold and stick onto your other plastic. Polymer clay is also a form of plastic. So those two things together will sort of like mesh and meld. The plasticizers in souffle, there's just way less of them. That's why it's not very sticky. It's like a drier clay. So what I have found that works absolutely the best is Cernit #1 white. You can also use Cernit translucent. That works great too. Obviously you're gonna have translucency, so your image might not be quite as vibrant. I've made some really cute earrings using translucent clay for just like that different type of a look. I've also used Cernit opaline white, which is great, especially if you're making something that you want to look like porcelain. So if you're using, for example, some sort of chinoiserie paper like this, and you make a little vase on opaline and use the transfer on that, it comes out looking like glass. It's really pretty, like porcelain glass. So I would, #1, recommend Cernit. All Cernit styles so far have worked. You're gonna wanna use a light colored clay. Here's why. If I try to put this image, for example, onto blue paper, that blue is just going to meld with the blue. You're not gonna be able to see it. It's not gonna stand out. Whereas if you put it on white, you're gonna see that entire image. If I try to put this on a yellow paper, you're not gonna see any of those lemons. They're gonna blend right in. And then everything else is going to be tinted with yellow. So it's not like you can put this onto different colors and have it show up as vibrant. It's like if you were using markers and coloring on construction paper that's colorful, you're not gonna be able to see the same color markers, etc. And then some other markers might kind of change color because you've got a different color background. I hope that makes sense. It's just gonna be best to use on white or very light clay. I've heard some people use their transfers on pearl clay for a shimmery look, and that's really fun too. Again, just lighter clay, better. So the reason I have some of these darker colored clays is because that's going to be our back of our piece. I almost always layer the clay that I'm using. So this will be the back of my piece and this will be the front. The way I do that is I will roll out my color to whatever thickness I want it to be or think it will be. And then I'll roll out a thinner piece of white So that way you're gonna see mostly your color on this side of the piece when you're finished. So my white here, this is Sculpey Primo. This, I think I rolled out initially on like a 7, and I initially rolled this out on a 4. And then I put them together and I run them through the pasta machine until I get to my desired thickness. I have an atlas, so 0 is the thickest, 9 is the thinnest. This is on a 4 because I know I'm gonna resin these pieces, and that's just the thickness I prefer. You could do it on whatever thickness you want. But what I do, after I've sandwiched these together initially, when this is a 7 and this is a 4, I'll start at a 0 and roll it through the same direction each time. So when these pieces are coming together, all the bubbles are going out the same direction. And you'll see that happen when you run your clay through your pasta machine. You'll see like the bubbles kind of go up, so that way they're not trapped within these 2 pieces of clay. The next thing you want to do once you've got your clay rolled out is you want to lay it on whatever tile you're going to be baking on. You don't want to be moving this a whole lot after you have the transfers on, because your fingers can make smudges on the transfer, on the ink, like once it's been transferred to the clay. So the way I lay the clay down is I'll start with one edge, I'll place that on my tile, and then I'll just smooth all the way down. And this again is avoiding bubbles. And I do this anytime I lay any clay down to bake. If I'm baking on the tile and I'm not moving it, this will start to adhere it to the tile, which is gonna make almost everything you do easier as far as cutting clay and resining and things like that. But this is also going to make sure that we get all the air bubbles out from underneath of it. So I can see one right here. I'm not gonna worry about it right now because you're gonna see what I'll do when I lay down the paper on top of that clay. Before we move on to our beads, I am gonna show you what I do just in a regular circumstance when I am using transfer sheets. I think this is a Portuguese tile on my site, Portuguese tile 1 maybe, I'm not sure which number. But I'm going to use this Portuguese tile. This particular style of tile, any of the blue and white and yellow, sells like crazy for me. All of the tiles have been selling really well. I have oranges, I have limes, I have like Mediterranean, I have Mexican tiles, I have all sorts of different types. But they sell really well. People really like the intricacy of these designs. And if you don't have time to sit and make a cane, then transfer sheets are just an excellent option for you to really get artistic. And I look at it as like a clothing designer. So a clothing designer often isn't designing the cloth that they're using to make their design, to make their clothing. They're picking out fabric that someone else designed, you know, or they're collaborating with a fabric designer, etc. So I kind of look at using transfer papers as like picking your fabric and then going from there as far as your shapes and things go. To use your transfer paper, you want to put the colorful side down, and I'm going to apply it much the same as I put the clay onto the tile. So I'm just going to start at one end, lay it down, and I'm going to push in the same direction. So you're going to see those air bubbles come up. So I'm using some pressure. I want this to adhere. I want the transfer paper really smushed on that clay, because that is how the toner from the transfer paper is going to infuse into the clay. So when you're pushing through, you'll be able to feel if you've got an air bubble. And it's honestly, people freak out about air bubbles. It's really honestly hardly ever an issue, hardly ever a problem. Even if you have some, it's usually okay. So don't stress too much if you feel a little air bubble. It's not gonna like ruin your entire project. So I'm just pushing to get whatever I can feel out. Plus it's kind of fun, like when you feel an air bubble and you kind of like just move it to the top. It's a little bit fun, a little tactile and sensory. So I'm just pushing in the same direction each time, because if I was going all around, I'd just be pushing any air bubbles like around in a circle, okay? You want to push it the same direction to get it out. If you feel one on the side here, you can push it over to get it out that direction. But basically you just want this really solidly braid onto your clay. You can use an acrylic roller as well and just really roll it on there. Again, same direction, pushing up, and that's gonna really adhere that. Pro tip, number one tip, well maybe not number one, but one of the best things you can do is leave your transfer on the clay for a good long while. I leave mine on between like 20 to 40 minutes. I've left it on for an hour. I haven't had any problems leaving it on too long. I'm not gonna say like no problems could occur because I haven't left it on like overnight or anything, but leaving these on for like about an hour hasn't caused any issues. The longer you leave it on, you know, upwards of 20 to 30 minutes, the better and more vibrant your clay will be. Think of it like when you're leaching your clay and you have a piece of paper You put your clay on it, you maybe fold it in half, put something over it to add pressure, and the oils leach out of the clay onto your paper. It's sort of like that. You want your toner and your design to almost like leach into your clay. The oils from the clay are going to start fusing with that, and that's what you want to have happen. So it's really important to leave this on for a long time. There are times when I've heard people talk about using transfers and saying, transfers never work for me. I can't get the color to look right. Number one, you might be using the wrong type of clay. Number two, you're probably not leaving this on long enough. Yes, I could go rinse this right now and the pattern might still be there, but when you bake it, it's not going to stay as vibrant, okay? So leave it there. Leaving that there, not touching it. What we're gonna move on to now is creating our clay for our beads that we're gonna make. I've got several pieces of clay. Here's why. We're gonna be making beads to go on a charm necklace, and I want them to have an eye pin at the top of them. Your clay can't be super thin and hold an eye pin. If I try to put this eye pin in this thickness of clay, this is rolled out on a 0, the thickest possible on my atlas. If I try to stick this pin in after this is baked, it's gonna crack the clay because it's going to just push it apart. It's not thick enough. We need a very thick base if we're gonna make a thick bead and have the intention of adding an eye pin, which I do. Now, you could make the same style of charms that I'm about to make, and you could make them thinner. You just would have to put a jump ring through instead of an eye pin, okay? So you have options. You don't have to use the eye pin. I just want to. So, and plus I thought it would be a nice thing to show you guys. So I'm gonna set the eye pin aside. I've got my blue clay for my backing. This is rolled out on a 0. I want it thicker than this because it's not thick enough for my eye pin. So I'm adding another layer of blue. This I think is rolled out on like a 5 maybe or something. I'm just gonna stack these up using the same method, kind of like pushing forward. So I'm just gonna smooth that out. This is clay that is tearing apart. By the way, this is Fimo. I'm not sure what color it is. I can look and try to add it on the notes, but it's just like a basic blue. I didn't do anything to it. Just really pretty blue from Fimo. And then this is actually clay that had transfer paper on it, and I just mixed it all in. One thing that's unique about my transfer papers is that I use a heavier duty paper, and for whatever reason, it leaves no lint. If you do it correctly, if you rinse it correctly, there's no lint at all. That is a problem I always had with thinner papers. Just like it was almost impossible to get the lint off. You could rub it, and then you start rubbing your design off, or there's just like leftover paper that looks gritty or soft, and that's not my personal aesthetic. I have seen some people kind of like almost leave a little bit of the paper for texture, and that's great. That looks cute for them. It's just not my thing. I wanted everything to be very clean and smooth, so I worked a really long time to find the best paper I could that gave me that result before I decided I would start selling transfer papers to people. So, all right, so anyways, because there's no lint left over from my transfer papers, you can easily mix it up and make a new color. Now, I didn't fully mix this one in because I'm just gonna put white over the top of it. I just wanted it as sort of like added clay, so I'm not wasting all of my blue clay. So I'm just gonna put a layer of this. Again, doing my best to kind of tap it out, but we are gonna braid this and use an acrylic roller to get bubbles out, so I'm not being too fussy about it. And then I've got some Cernet number 1 here. I might have to go re-roll it because I didn't realize it was gonna stick to my tile and rip all over the place. Son of a gun. All right, this is Cernet number 1, and this is rolled out on an 8 because I don't need this to be super thick. I just need it to be on the top layer so that my colors will pop when I add my transfer papers. So this is a good way to conserve your white clay, because I know sometimes we use white clay the most, and so you don't want to use it all up all the time. So that is what I do. I just do a thin layer on top. So doing my best to get some of the bubbles out as I lay that down. And then now we've got like a nice thick sandwich of clay, okay? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna adhere it to this tile. You can see there's some bubbles. I'm gonna burnish this to the top. I'm doing the same thing I was doing earlier, where I am using my fingers to press bubbles to the edge. So going all in one direction. And then I'm gonna use my brayer to do that as well. The reason I'm not going to run this clay back through the pasta machine is because it's too thick now. It's thicker than a 0. It's thicker than my thickest setting. So I can't run it through. I have to do this manually. So I'm just going to my acrylic roller / brayer in one direction to get as much of the air bubbles out as I can. Now, if you've still got some, you can do the handy dandy trick of slicing them with your X-Acto knife and then sort of rubbing them and burnishing them back together. I'm not going to worry about it right now because I want to move quickly. So I'm just going to use the areas where I'm not seeing any bubbling. All right, so our surface is now about as smooth as it's going to be. There's a few little bubbles in there, and I'm just going to avoid those spots because I am actually going to be cutting these out so that I can make cute little charms. So I'm not going to put a whole paper on there. I'm just going to cut around what I need. And I'm making just one necklace to show you guys. If I was going to make a bunch of things, I would like cut all of these out probably. But I know that I want some tomatoes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut around a couple of these. You can cut them a little larger or a little tighter, just depending on what sort of cutters you have. You just want to make sure you're covering your area. But I think, judging from my cutters that I got a little bit ago, I can pretty much cut right around these and they'll be fine. So I'm just going to set them aside. I'm not going to make you guys watch me cut paper because that's silly. So I'm going to go through and cut some of these and then we'll come back. Okay, so I've cut out my little shapes that I'm going to use for my beads or charms or whatever you want to call them. And now I am just going to place my water transfers the same way that I did the big one, just on a smaller scale. So starting at the bottom, rub up. You do want it to be rubbed on nice and tight. And I'm just going to put these anywhere they fit really. And we'll take a piece of paper and we'll braid them down at the end. So I'm just fitting them all on here. You don't want them too tight. Like I'm realizing I probably put this one too close together. Just make sure you have a little bit of separation between them because you're going to want your cutter to kind of like go through all these layers of clay. And you could do this with a little less wasted clay if you sort of cut out a basic shape first. Like you could go through and let me show you just for an example. You could cut this out first and then apply paper to it, just so that way you don't lose as much clay. But whatever clay I have in between here, I'll usually just mix it up to make a different shade of blue or whatever. Use my scraps pretty efficiently, so it honestly didn't even occur to me to cut them out first until I was doing it, and I was like, maybe some people don't want all that scrap, but I'm okay with the scrap. So, all right, I think that's gonna do it. So we're going to take a piece of paper over the top and just really burnish all of the transfer papers down. You can use your roller. We just want everything stuck on there so the toner can fuse with the clay. And we're gonna leave all of this for probably about half an hour, and then we'll come back and we will cut our shapes and move forward from there. All right, our clay has been sitting with the transfer papers on top for quite a while now. We're gonna go ahead and rinse off. So I like to pour my water out of a cool looking bottle just for reels because it looks really fun. But if you just drip the water on with my particular transfer papers, they're very thick and the paper pulp will sort of just fluff up, like kind of like when you make couscous or something where you put the hot water in and everything just fluffs up. And let the fibers kind of soak up all of that water rather than just rinsing it down the sink. I find that this method works great. Not saying you couldn't rinse it down the sink, but I live in an old 1950s house, and if this pulp kind of dries up, it does get hard again. And although it's water soluble, it just makes me a little nervous to rinse it down my sink. So I just swipe it off and put it in with my recycling. But I'm gonna go ahead and put some water on these little guys too. And the paper will soak up the water like almost immediately. It happens really quickly, so you don't need to leave these on for any length of time really. What you want to make sure of is just that there's enough water so that the fibers can fully absorb it. So I don't know how well you can see that. Let me, with this tile, I can turn it sideways for sure. But see how thick that paper is and how that just sort of puffs up. It's really satisfying. It's great for reels. And I just really prefer this type of paper, even though it is like 4 times more expensive than the typical transfer paper, because the paper is really pricey that I use. I will probably end up raising my prices on paper, but right now I'm doing $3.50 a sheet, which I think is very reasonable for what you're getting. So once that's soaked in just for a second, you're gonna just wipe it off with your finger. So I just take a finger. I see some people using like paint brushes or makeup brushes or even like the back of a razor blade. I just do it with my finger. But see how nicely that comes off, how vibrant the transfer is. I'm going to turn this really quick. I'm just gonna hold this in the hand for a second, but you can, while the paper is still a little wet, you can wipe your finger along this and nothing's gonna happen. It's not gonna get smeary. But once the water sort of dries or evaporates, your finger will smudge the ink. So you kind of want to do this step like a little quickly, get everything off. What I do is I wipe all of this off, like I said, put it in with my recycling, and then I will do another little layer of water just to get any excess fibers off. At this point, this is where if you want to take it and just rinse it under the sink really gentle with a very slow flow of water, you can gently rinse off any of the remaining fibers, and with the paper that I use, all of the fibers will come off. So if you're still seeing fibers, you haven't rinsed it enough. Thinner paper has an issue where you can continue rinsing, and I find that it's really hard to get all the fiber off. So don't think that if you have bought paper from me that you have to leave it with fibers on it. They will come off, I promise. So I'm going to go ahead and swipe the paper off of here, and then I'll go rinse these too. Like I said, under running water, but I'm just going to get all of this excess pulp first so I don't mess up my pipes in my old mid-century house. Okay, so now I will take these and I will just, like I said, very gentle, thin trickle of water, and I'll wipe it gently. And like I said, also, you do want to do that before the water has dried or evaporated, because once it has, then the ink does become a little tacky and it can get smudged. So do this step like all sort of at once. All right, now that I rinsed all of the fibers off, I'm going to go ahead and cut my shapes out. So I already matched up these cutters with most of the shapes, so I'm just going to go for it. I don't let the clay dry or anything, or pat it dry. I don't find it to be necessary at all. So I'm all about cutting out unnecessary steps, and to me that is an unnecessary step. You can do it if you want, but it's not going to make a difference. So I am going to just line up my little fishy. I'm trying to do this on an angle. Normally I would work from a bird's eye view, but I'm going to do my best to make these stripes kind of straight. But I'm going to push probably about halfway down, and I'm going to wiggle them out. Because this is a really thick chunk of clay, because we're making these beads, I just want to be really careful. Okay, so then I'm going to push it down all the way again. I'm going to go like halfway, remove, go a little further down, wiggle it out, and then push all the way. So that will be a really cute little fish bead. And then I'm just going to do the same thing with everything else. I'm going to line up my cutter, give a little press, pull it out. The reason you want to press and then pull out is because you want your clay to stay stuck to your tile and not to stick into your clay cutter. If it sticks in your clay cutter, it can be a little tricky to get it off without smearing the transfer. So it's just sort of like when you have an embossed cutter and you kind of can go halfway in and pull out and then go halfway. It just removes the suction so that you're not pulling your clay into your cutter. So I'm going a little bit further, pull it out to release that suction, and then all the way down. And depending on how thick your clay is, you might not even need to do that part. Okay, so I'm just gonna leave that there. I'll continue on. So I'm not gonna make you keep watching this, but just remember you're gonna go a little bit in, pull it out to break the suction, a little bit further, pull it out to break the suction, and then all the way down. And then everything will stay put. All right, I've got my beads cut out. And what I'm gonna do is I just want to make sure that all these layers look nice together. So I'm just gonna sort of smooth them with my fingers, because of the way we layered it, we want everything to look nice and smushed together. So I'm just going to avoid touching the top of my piece because I don't want to smear the clay or the transfer. And I'm just going to smooth these out with my fingers just a little, just to make sure they look nice, because I want them to look like beads. And we probably did this like a little bit thicker than we even needed to put in a pin. I probably could have gone without that second layer of blue, but that's okay, no big deal. So play around with the thickness and see, what you feel like works best for you. This Fimo clay is so sticky. It turns out really pretty. Just know going in that it's it can be very sticky, and you can see all the dye. You can get messy fingers, so just be careful if you're working with colorful clay and then you've got your white clay for your transfers. Just be mindful of that. And I'm just going to use my finger on the sides of this one because I can see just a few little separations, and I'm just going to gently smooth that out. All right, so I'm going to continue doing that in a moment before I bake those. I am going to show you how I usually cut my tiles. Let me cut off this bottom little section because I wanted to show you how after the water is gone off the clay, your transfers can smear and get fingerprints. You see that? Like if you accidentally rub it, you can kind of smear it. So just be careful. It'll also pick up fingerprints usually, although this one's behaving really well and hardly messing up at all. They can get smeared, they can get fingerprinty, so just be careful after the water has evaporated that you don't mess that up. All right, so I just like to take a tissue blade and I like to trim around my tiles. And this is probably the third, I think, summer that I've made this style, and they always sell really well for me. Whatever reason, I don't know, but people love the tiles and they love just like the square tile earring. At least the people who are purchasing from me and at craft fairs and stuff like really like it. So I'm gonna get rid of this little half section too, because I had cut my transfer sheet and I can use this for studs. So I'm gonna carefully move that out of the way. And what I like to do is just follow the lines, adhere to the tile. I just push my blade right along the lines of these square tiles. And I just made a section on my website too where you can just go to the tile collection and all of my tile papers are there. So you can find them really easily. But I just press down on that line and then do the same thing across. And the cool thing is you can bake it just like this. And then when you pull it off, you can kind of snap the pieces of clay apart, and it is really fun for reels. People really like the ASMR of that. So that's something fun to try. You just lift it up with your tissue blade, you know, run your blade along the bottom of it, and then you can like snap all the pieces apart, and it is very satisfying. So I just bake it just like that. And because we have cut all of those, they'll just snap really easily. My oven does just fine on 275 for like 45 minutes. Even these thicker pieces would be okay. I'll probably do it for about 60 just to be on the safe side and make sure that these fully harden. When I bake my clay, I always tent it. So I take a piece of tin foil. I do not let the tin foil touch the surface of the transfer paper because it will lift it off. So you got to make sure you're doming it, or you can even like fold it in half actually like a tent so it goes over. But what I do is I usually just take one end of the tin foil, put it under my tile, and then dome it over the top. And I do make sure that it's completely over the top of anything with a transfer paper, because we got to remember we're doing this on white clay or translucent clay, and those clays have a tendency to yellow in the oven or to scorch in the oven if there's like a temperature spike. And having that tin foil over the top really does help avoid any discoloration of your transfers. So I highly recommend it. You cannot just put a piece of paper on top of this because the paper will stick. Whatever you're tenting with cannot be touching the transfer papers because it will mess them up, okay? So make sure it's like over the top. So I'm gonna go bake them, and then we will come back and I'll show you how they look and how we will finish them. All right, so I have taken everything out of the oven. I've got all my little pieces. I kind of already broke them apart for a reel. And I can only do it once. So I did record it to use in a reel, so you guys didn't get to see the break apart, but try it on your own because it's really fun. So I'm gonna move these little guys out of the way. Hopefully making the larger transfer slab helped you guys to really see how to do it properly. That was the whole point of the larger one, so I'm not gonna do much more with that right now. What I wanna show you is how I would finish these, and then I will give you some details on assembling your charm necklace or bracelet or whatever you wanna make. But I like to use this pen. This is Deco Color Premium in gold, and it's got a very bright gold color. What you're gonna do after you get your pieces out of the oven is you will want to sand them just a little bit. So I'm not gonna do it on top of everything, but just go through and sand the edges, make them nice and clean. I definitely did make these thicker than they needed to be, so you guys could cut out a layer for sure because they're pretty thick, which is fine. There's nothing bad about it, just that, you know, I just used more clay than I needed to. So if you want them this thick, that's totally cool. If you want them thinner, use less clay. But look how cute. I am going to be resining these. You could coat them with Female Gloss Glaze is nice. I really like Varnish by Darby. I am also going to color the edges with gold. You could color with any color paint pen. I was actually looking for my red paint pen because I thought that would look really cool, and I cannot find it. I might look again before I color this one. But yeah, so I just went around the edges, and this is probably still wet. but I just went around the edges and colored in gold. Once I am done coloring the edges and letting that dry, I'll resin them, and I can show you a little bit about that. But I did want to mention, I've heard many people say that you don't need to seal transfer paper once it has been baked onto the clay, and I disagree. I think you should always seal anything that you have added to the clay, because there is a chance that something someone's using in their personal life can take it off, or if they go swimming with them. Granted, you can put all of that in a disclaimer and let people know they shouldn't do those things. I have one of those that goes out with all of my earring packages, but people don't always read those and people don't always listen. And I want everything to last forever. So I am going to show you guys what happens when you use nail polish remover baked on transfer paper, because I've heard too many people say nothing will take it off. It's fine. You don't have to seal it at all. And I really disagree with that. Before I resin pieces, I like to clean them off with rubbing alcohol, just a quick swipe. You don't want to, be crazily wiping at it, because it can remove it. Acetone, I'm going to show you what that does to your pieces. Look how easily that wipes off with just a little bit of acetone. So imagine someone buys a really pretty pair of earrings from you and has them sitting on their vanity and accidentally spills some nail polish. Boom, gone. Okay? And acetone isn't the only substance that can take them off. Perfumes, body lotions, facial washes, swimming in a pool, all the things that people really should be more careful with their earrings about, but sometimes aren't. I just always like to make sure that everything is sealed, so I know I've kind of done my due diligence and made sure that the pieces are gonna stand the test of time. I found a red acrylic marker, so I'm gonna go ahead and color the side of this red. This is just one of my children's paint markers, so it's not like the ones I normally use, but I'm pretty sure my husband stole the one I normally use, so this is what I've got. But like, how cute with a little red edge. Fun, right? Just finish your edges however you would like and let those dry. And then after they're dry, we will add our little pins, and then I will show you how I'm going to resin them, which is pretty standard resining, but I am going to do, I don't know if I'll do the back. I don't think it's necessary. I'll do the sides and the top. I just realized I was not recording while I drilled the holes for these, but basically all you're gonna do is take your drill bit, and I use like a pretty skinny drill bit, but you can use whatever size you like, as long as it's not too much bigger than the pin that you're gonna use. If you are using a pin, you want it to be about the same size as your pin. So what I did was I just drilled a hole straight down into the charm. You wanna go about the length of the pin if you're using one, because if you don't drill far enough, then when you twist your pin in, your pin is going to push your clay apart and like kind of split it. So you need to drill the hole long enough to get in there. You can also add some super glue in to secure the pin if you feel that you need it. And then you've got like a cute little charm with a pin on it. And it's totally fine if you don't want to make them this thick. If you want them thinner and you just want to drill through it like you would an earring, that's fine too. I just knew that making little charms was the look I was going for. So now you're gonna want to seal your pieces. And the reason I put the pins in first is so that you can have something to hold on to while you're sealing. It just makes it a little bit easier. Some of the sealant can go onto the pin, which will then help hold it in place as well. You have many different options. One varnish I really like is Vernice. You could put a little hook or an earring hook through here and dunk your piece in, let the excess drip off, and let it just dry that way to fully cover it. That's a quick and easy way to, do a top coat on a charm. There are dip-in UV resins where you just dip, just like what I described with the Vernice. You just dip into the resin and let it cure that way. There's your typical UV resin, which is what I'm going to be using. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm not going to do it on camera because the sun is shining through and it's going to start curing my pieces. But what I'm going to do is just brush my resin on to the outside edges, let that cure under my UV light, and then I'll do the top last. So I'm gonna do that. I have other videos on resin, so I don't wanna waste time on that. And once that's done, I will assemble the necklace and show you what it looks like. All right, so here is our finished product. I used a paperclip chain for the necklace. It just has like a regular clasp in the back. I went with the fishy for like the main event. And then I just sort of spaced out the charms around it, skipped like every other link to keep it balanced. And I used some of these little nautical themed charms that I had lying around. I did leave these guys off for now just because this looked right. So I just wanted to keep it how it is there. And then, yeah, like super cute. How fun is this? It's a great way to use transfer papers. You obviously don't have to do it with this nautical theme. It could be anything you want. You could do florals, you could do geometric patterns. Like literally the sky is the limit, and whatever you can think up, there's probably charms out there for it. I will link these packs for you if I can find them because I've had them for a while, but I'll also link the necklace chain. But just like, how fun. Another extra little thing in your arsenal that you can use in an interesting way. And the little bits of the transfer paper just look really cute. The resin looks nice, they look shiny, they look substantial. So they look, you know, nice, like they're a nice bead instead of just something we slapped on. So I hope you enjoyed learning about the best way to use transfer paper, and I hope this kind of gets your creativity flowing and you think up some new ways to use your papers. If you did not know already, both free and paid tier members receive a special code from me every month that will get you something fun and special when you check out at my shop, transfer paper wise. So this month there's a code for buy 10 papers and get one free in the free tier, and then in the paid tier there's a code for buy 8 papers, get one free. So your deal's going to be a little bit better in the paid tier, just as a thank you to those members for their financial support of my Patreon. And the other code is for the free members, just as a thank you for being here. I know not everybody can afford to do the extra education, or you might pop in and out, and I want you to be able to have some fun special surprise too when you're shopping with me. So I hope that was helpful, and if you have any questions or you need more information or some help, do feel free to reach out to me. I'm easiest to get a hold of on Instagram, but you can message me here too, and I'll usually see those at some point during the day because those notifications go to my email. And I hope you have a great day. Have fun creating. Bye-bye.